Las Vegas Raiders, next team up in our preseason previews, and another really, really interesting one to talk about. Of course, another team alongside the Broncos, who I started off with, that made a really big offensive trade for a player that I'm a really big fan of. So last year, 2021, 10-7 record, make the playoff. Didn't really go further than that, but this was definitely a team that maybe outperformed expectations. I did like their roster going to last year, maybe not quite as much as they ended up proving. Obviously, one of the best offenses in football, and a lot of really encouraging signs as far as the roster goes to look forward to going into this year. Losses-wise, offensively especially, you look at these names, and while there's a lot on there, it's basically no one you care about. In fact, I would argue a lot of it is addition by subtraction, just players who are not very good. The only ones on there, at all relevant, Zay Jones, I think, is a pretty decent receiver, actually. And Alec Ingold, of course, one of the best fullbacks in football, but he is still a fullback. And defensively, while there are definitely better players on that side, specifically Yannick Ngakoue, Casey Hayward, both fairly high-end players in their positions, while limited in certain ways. Pretty good. Other guys, Carl Nass, Quentin Jefferson, important role players, but as we'll get into, I think they're going to be okay. But more importantly, you talk about the additions, and the number one name on this list, of course, Devontae Adams. I think very clearly, very, very clearly, the best wide receiver in football. It's not really close. The guy's a one-man offense. Regardless of who his quarterback is, he is literally constantly open. And it's hard for me to even put into words how excited I think Raiders fans should be for this guy to be on their team. He's incredible. And he's not the only one. There are other offensive role players on this list we'll talk about that I actually have quite a bit of respect for, too. Defensively, a lot of names on this list. Headliner, of course, Chandler Jones, another player, really good. But other guys, too, important role players that are actually a lot of these guys are going to end up playing snaps. We're going to talk about the defense as a whole specifically, but a lot of names there. This is a draft class. With rookies, I tend to stay away from talking about them too much. Everybody's wrong about rookies going to the NFL. We'll see how good they are once they play. But this is what they look like. So we talk about the offense right here. And the first very important first thing to talk about the Raiders is this is another team going through a coaching change. Going to Josh McDaniels, which is, I think, maybe the most interesting or curious head coach hire of the offseason, or even more importantly, offensive play caller, because I don't know if we have any idea what type of offense he's going to run. He's been with the Patriots for a really long time, and while recently they've, was with Mac Jones, and even before that last year with Tom Brady, have run a lot of simple, short passing game stuff. They've relied a ton on the run game. But we've seen before in Josh McDaniels' career, obviously dating back quite a ways at this point, that he's exceedingly willing to go deep or move the ball down the field a lot more aggressively. I don't know what we're going to see here, but I actually expect a lot of positive things, especially given the talent on this team. So, first of all, the offensive line. This is definitely the weakness of this offense, but as far as weaknesses go, you could do a lot worse. I think Andre James is clearly a starter in the NFL. While he does lack strength, he's not really a plus in the run game. He's fine, and he's somebody I think is a really above-average pass protector that you're never going to complain about. Their guards are definitely the weak spot, specifically Alex Leatherwood, last year's first-round pick, was just bad. What's encouraging, though, is first-year offensive linemen frequently are not the players that they end up being in the long run. Now, that might be changing more in recent NFL history as we see better and better rookies, but there is still hope for Alex Leatherwood, and more importantly, I think, if he's going to play guard like it seems like he's going to, it might not matter that much. I doubt he's going to be bad enough to torpedo this offense, and it's not like he didn't put nothing on film last year. Especially as a guy who has, he has okay movement skills. He wasn't getting, tossed around. So I do think there are things that you can look for with him. The other guard spot, I actually like Jermaine Illuminor as a point of attack run blocker. John Simpson's kind of the same player, just a little bit worse. Tackles, Cole Miller solid. Cole Miller, big fan of. While he's never going to, again, he's not a lead in the run game. I think that's kind of a theme here with him and Andre James. He'll do fine. He can get to the second level okay, and he does absolutely pass protect, more than good enough to justify being a left tackle on a really good offense, as he was last year. Brandon Parker is the one that people are going to question. And Brandon Parker, going into last year, is actually a player I thought should have started more games or played more. And I still have faith that he can be a reasonable player. He definitely had struggles last year. I don't know if he's playing hurt or something, or maybe I could have been wrong about him or anything like that. But he stuck around the NFL for a reason, and I do think as a pass protector, especially if he's going against non-elite guys, he'll be good enough, again, in this offense specifically. The next part, so as a whole, right, with the offensive weapons, I think this is a really important thing to remember with the Raiders, right? They funneled things so heavily through Darren Waller for the last 2-3 years. And I think that actually ran them into a lot of problems because Darren Waller, while he has a lot of useful skills, I think I had him ranked as like the third best tight end in football, so I think really highly of him. He is still a player that has clear limitations that can be taken away by smart defenses, as has been literally proven at times the last 2 years. Interestingly, though, despite that, I actually think they should lean more heavily into that going into this year, again, because specifically the addition of Devontae Adams. So what do I mean by that? Basically, Devontae Adams, as I said before, is a one-man offense. He literally, no matter what you do, he is going to be open. He is going to create yards. He's going to create first downs. He's going to create movement for your offense. So if you run your offense, again, through Darren Waller, as far as like calling plays, calling screens, having route concepts to get him open and the ball in his hands, which is where he's really good, Devontae Adams is going to win on the other side of those plays regardless, and then you're creating two really dangerous options per play. Now, obviously, that's not like a down-by-down every single time thing, but just in general, I think that'd be really smart for them to do, and I bet you Josh McDaniels does see that. But it's not just those two, right? Like, Hunter Renfrow is really good, and I think people really caught on to that last year. Somebody talked about, I thought really highly of him going into the year, too. And the dude, again, he wins in important areas of the field extremely frequently and is a big plus as far as moving the ball. He's just open. He's just open a lot and quickly. He's really good. They have other guys, too, with their depth at wide receiver. Matt Collins is more of a, he's outside only, not a huge positive or a huge difference maker, but he can absolutely play. He does have some contested catch skills. He's not slow. I think Matt Collins, again, deservedly is in the NFL. And Keelan Cole is kind of the one I'm excited to talk about. Even back to the Jags days, the dude, again, shares a lot of qualities with really high-end wide receivers across the NFL. He actually gets open. Now, it's not to the same degree as, obviously, Devontae Adams. He's not even a good example. I think more of him as like a almost Robert Woods type player. Now, I think Robert Woods, before his ACL surgery, is like one of the top 10 receivers in football, so that's really high praise. And Keelan Cole's not that good. But he is a guy who consistently wins in routes. He does have ability to catch the ball, which you'd hope for an NFL receiver, but he catches the ball in tight spaces in traffic and stuff like that. And while he's not great or blazing speed or whatever after the catch, he does enough to be useful. And if he's your third receiver or fourth receiving option, you're, especially with a guy that I think is as smart as McDaniels is, you're looking at real positives there. Tight ends too. I mean, it's not just Darren Waller. Foster Moreau, I think, is really good. He's not a super difference maker, not somebody you call plays for or whatever, but he gets open. He converts a lot of touchdowns, and he's a useful player. Jacob Hollister is a player I think is actually severely underrated. Should have been used consistently more his entire career. Played for really, really bad offensive coaching staffs most of the time outside of last year on Buffalo, where they had a lot of other weapons anyway, and I understand that. But Jacob Hollister, again, he gets open very consistently, especially from the tight end position, which is an important skill. They also bring in Jacob Johnson, who, fullback, but also one of the better ones in the NFL. But obviously this all comes down to Derek Carr. Now, I don't think Derek Carr is as good as last year maybe made him look. But that's only by the standard of him being like an MVP candidate or one of the top, 5 quarterbacks in football. But that's not important, right? Because it's about winning games, and Derek Carr clearly showed last year that he's good enough to win games, especially in a positive offensive environment. And what you could be looking at this year is one of the most positive offensive environments in the game. Again, a lot of that depends on Josh McDaniels, but when you're talking about a quarterback who is capable of making quick decisions and hitting open receivers, throwing a Darren Waller-focused offense with goddamn Devontae Adams, you're just talking about an offense that's going to constantly move the ball. And that is almost all you can ask for. Now, Devontae Adams also is a touchdown machine in the red zone. Josh Jacobs is actually pretty good at that himself. While there are other issues I can see with that, Darren Waller specifically not terribly good at it. But, whatever. The point is they're going to move the ball a lot, and they should be really, maybe not completely explosive offense, but a really, really good offense. I'll mention the running game, too, here while I'm quick. That I'm lower on. The Patriots have run this run scheme for a while that's really dependent on how much push they get at the front, and while here you might get some, it's not even comparable to the Patriots have been getting, and I wouldn't look too forward to that, but I think a lot of their run game is going to be through short plays to Devontae Adams, to Hunter Renfrow, that type of stuff, screens Darren Waller, so they'll be fine. It doesn't really matter. Then we get to the defense. So the question is if I think the offense is that good, right? Is the defense going to keep them in games or give the offense the ability to win the games? And at first glance, I'm going to go ahead and guess yes. And the most important aspect of that is, again, it's coaching, and it's that they bring in Patrick Graham, who has been the defensive coordinator for the Giants for the last couple of years, somebody who has unbelievably outperformed the talent on his defense. As someone I have a ton of respect for, plays a really, really smart, modern NFL defense as far as sitting in zones, kind of, but still being aggressive, especially near the line of scrimmage. It's actually really similar defensive scheme to what I talked about last time with the Broncos. And it's just really good. Patrick Graham is really smart. He's really good at what he does. And while the personnel here is definitely lacking, as we'll talk about, I think it's going to be okay. So we'll start with the defensive line first. And this is actually a kind of a big issue, because something that is really common to these 3-4 defenses that are good is they have down linemen who are consistently able to make plays and create penetration. That is really not the case here. Again, if you look at the Giants teams that Patrick Graham was coaching, they had Dexter Lawrence, really good. They had Leonard Williams, really, really good. They had other guys, Austin Johnson, they had other guys rotating in that were really positives in those areas, and here that, again, it just doesn't exist. Now, Bilal Nichols is one of those types of players. I think he's really, really good. He's injured to start the year. We'll see when he even comes back. And while Jonathan Hankins, I think, could give a form of that production, it would be not what you need from those spots. They do have guys that can create that penetration theoretically. Kendall Vickers, Vernon Butler have shown that at times, but over any real sample size, not really, and to any real frequency. So, whatever. Tyler Lancaster's bad. You really hope he's not playing. Andrew Billings is a true run defender. Only Kyle Pico, the same thing. So, that is one issue that I want to highlight immediately with this. Their edges do help that, though. Chandler Jones is a really unique player, someone I really like talking about because he's so different from most really good NFL defensive ends. So most NFL defensive ends, that really high end, right, are guys that beat their tackle, beat them very quickly, and kill the quarterback. You talk about your Bosa brothers, Myles Garrett, that type of thing. Chandler Jones doesn't really do that. What he does do is he basically always beats his opposing offensive line matchup over the course of, say, 3 seconds. His hand usage is so good. His technique is so good. It really seems really impossible to keep him from collapsing a pocket over the course of 3.5, 4 seconds. That creates positives and negatives, but it is overwhelmingly positives. And Chandler Jones is a player I like a ton. That is a super useful skill set. He'll be really good. Max Crosby also is just better than I thought he was going into last year. I didn't think he was bad or anything, but he was winning in ways that I kind of just mentioned way more frequently than I ever would have expected. And he's somebody that on the other side you're excited about. Kyler Fackrell, too. He comes over with Patrick Graham from the Giants, or 2 years ago. I think he was on the Chargers last year. But he's a player who is as your third defensive end he's pretty damn good. He plays the run really well. He creates fine pass rush. It's nothing special, but it's definitely there. So you're doing okay, at least the edge positions. Now Cleveland Farrell is kind of the man out there, but I do think there's hope for him, actually. Cleveland Farrell is obviously a disappointment for his draft slot, but that doesn't really matter, right? We care about what he is useful for now. And I think they would be really, really smart to take Cleveland Farrell and try him at 3-4 end. He's going to be undersized, but whatever. That's not the important part. The important part, right, is if he can produce as if someone who's the correct size or better. And if you're going to have him just be a complete zero as a pass rusher, maybe if he's going against bigger, heavier offensive linemen, he can step up in that aspect. I think more importantly, he guaranteed pretty much by virtue of his size and athleticism is going to be a better playmaker penetrator from a 3-4 spot than any of the other guys they have. Now, it might not go well. He might just get washed out of every hole in existence. But for as good as he is as a run defender from a gap over, I can't imagine that actually be the case. So I would love for them to do that. Is it going to happen? I have no idea. But I think that'd be really smart. You talk about the rest of the personnel here. So the one position, there we go. I just kind of highlighted a problem, I guess, a little bit, the defensive line. But another real problem is the linebackers here, the inside linebackers. Denzel Perriman is bad. Now, Raiders fans might get bad because last year he made a lot of plays in the run game, and he will do that if he's on the field. Between the tackle, or really, more accurately, between the guards, the dude is one of the best in the NFL as far as fitting runs. and blowing up plays and being strong in the hole. That's cool. That's awesome and all. And that is useful against certain teams, but against the vast majority of teams, especially in 2022, he gets you in so much trouble. He's horrible in coverage. He has no range sideline to sideline the vast majority of the time. In fact, he triggers kind of the wrong way frequently. And, I don't hate the guy or nothing, but just he should not be a starting linebacker in the NFL, unquestionably. Again, there are certain matchups, certain teams that he can play against for sure, as far as fitting. The Patriots last year actually would be a good example of that. But, whatever. Micah Kaiser, another player, I like him better for sure. He has clear limitations. He's just a mediocre pass guy or pass defender. And as a run player, he can kind of do the job. I think you're fine with him. You're better off than Denzel Perriman, but again, nothing special. Kenny Young, another story. Can't play pass coverage to save his life. Not particularly reactive in a positive way to smart offenses. He was better on the Broncos last year than I expected him to be. I think a lot of that was playing on a really good defense and not having a particularly tough job, which maybe is the case here too. And I should mention, Patrick Graham has gotten away with really bad linebacker play before. He's been with the Giants again, where they had Blake Martinez, one of the worst linebackers in football, and rookies. I think Tate Crowder is good, whatever. The point is they were like rookies, really young players, super unproven guys who didn't know what they were doing, that he was still producing really positive defenses with most of the time. Devontae Diablo, I will freely admit, I don't know exactly how I feel about him yet. He might be pretty good. He might fix a lot of the stuff I'm talking about very actively, and I know Raiders fans like him, so I'm not going to say necessarily one or the other, and I need to watch more of him to really figure out what I think, or rewatch him, I guess I can't. But we'll see. Jaylen Brown, that was the one I wanted to get to. Jaylen Brown's good. He should be starting for this team, literally, unquestionably. He's the best one on this roster. He does all the stuff that I was just talking about very positively as far as making plays sideline to sideline, and especially if you're going to have a defensive line who's not doing that for your team, you need someone who can react, get to the stuff from the backside. That's Jaylen Brown. Start Jaylen Brown. Secondary-wise, another spot here. Trayvon Mullen is hurt to start the year, and while when he's playing, he can match up with some of the bigger, slower wide receivers on the outside, he generally just can't keep up with actual good receivers, and that runs you into a lot of issues while he's not a disaster, and I think he has a role in the NFL. Rocky Sin, man, he's been really sheltered in a Colts defense that puts almost no stress on their corners. And the dude is just meat for quick receivers. He gets smoked by guys with any form of lateral agility. And now his numbers might not bear that out again, because in the Colts defense that he's coming from, he was asked to do really specific things as far as playing soft zones on the outside of the numbers. And it does have size, and when he does get into players at the line of scrimmage, especially bigger, slower guys, like this team, like Cortland Sutton, for example, ain't got a chance here mostly as far as the matchup wise. Problem is, that's not, Cortland Sutton's not the one you need to stop to be a good NFL team. It's a lot of these other types of receivers, like a Tyreek Hill. That matchup is untenable. Now, Patrick Graham, I think, is going to know that and is going to ask fairly similar things of Rocky Sin as they did before, but him as your cornerback one, it's just concerning, I should tell you that. Darius Phillips, on the other hand, actually should be the cornerback one on this team. He's pretty good. He's been kind of buried on a good Bengals depth chart for a couple years now, but when he plays, he produces. He's not amazing. He's not going to lock people down, but he is good enough to stick on players and not give up more than you can live with as a defense. He's good. Darius Phillips should be starting for this team. Anthony Everett, whatever. He's fine depth. Not, again, a player you should see a ton of snaps, but it is what it is. You got Nate Hobbs in the slot. He's awesome. Proved that last year. Really good run defender. He actually helps a lot in those areas I was worried about with the linebackers, too. As a coverage guy, while not incredible, not top of the slot corner field, he's good enough. He should be playing. Nate Hobbs is awesome. Meek Robertson, Crib on the block, whatever. Meek Robertson's really undersized. Crib on the block's not very good. You do have depth issues here. Safety, too. I mean, Trevor Moore was awesome as a rookie. He'll be a good player for a long time. He's a true free safety. He reacts to a lot of stuff, keeps a lot of stuff in front of him. Isn't somebody that I'm concerned about. Jonathan Abram, I feel actually like better, I think, than most people do at this point, because he does react well to stuff at the line of scrimmage. He can move decent. He's still athletic. And as a coverage guy, I don't think he gets burned as bad as people like to say he does. He's not somebody I'm ever throwing a man-to-man coverage on like a receiver, right? He's not that type of safety. He will get cooked there. But against a lot of these tight ends or, whatever running backs, whatever matchup problems that people think, I don't think he's necessarily any worse than some of these safeties that get rated way above him now. Again, not a great player. Is he a unquestioned starter going forward? He shouldn't be, but he can contribute to a decent NFL defense. I want to mention Deron Harmon too. Really good veteran, been in the league for a long time. He does a lot of stuff that Trevor Moore does as far as an insurance blanket and just being hit the rear of the defense, not letting stuff get behind him. Good signing. Start whatever. You're not going to start. So as a defense as a whole, the main thing I'm concerned about is they really, I think, personally lack quick pass rush, especially that can get there from the interior. That's just non-existent. And while Max Crosby can do that at times, he's not Myles Garrett. While Chandler Jones sets that clock, he doesn't win quickly the way that those other guys do. So if you're facing offenses, that are getting to get the ball out quick, you can see a lot of issues, especially because their corners are very prone to losing very quickly. So I think this is a defense that's going to look really, really good at times against certain teams or on certain drives where they are able to get into people and stop stuff right at the line of scrimmage, and then that pass rush does get there. But when that doesn't happen, I also think this team can give up a lot of explosive plays. They don't match up well with modern NFL passing offenses through the middle of the field necessarily very well. And there are definitely issues that can be exploited here. Overall, though, I do think that they're good enough to keep up with their offense. Their offense is going to be awesome, and as long as you have a decent defense at that point, you're talking about a contender. That's what they have. Their schedule, is actually fairly easy too. They end up getting away with a lot of stuff defensively that I'd be more worried about for other teams. With the Patrick Graham stuff, it really what beats him or what beats those types of defenses, right? Are just smart quarterbacks who understand how to get the ball out quickly. But if you look at the schedule, you do have Russell Wilson, Mahomes for sure, and they'll do a lot of that type of stuff. But Justin Herbert's still more in the gunslinger type of phase at this point. And the rest of the schedule, what the hell? Matt Stafford later in the season too, but they might be really good by virtue on defense, even by virtue of the schedule they're playing. And offensively, like I said, I'm very confident in them being very good. So, Las Vegas Raiders, you're not doing too bad. I'd be excited for sure.